Laurence, man, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate this, dude.
No worries at all. You're very welcome.
It's
It's been a long time coming. We've been meaning to do it for a while.
yes, and it hasn't been the case, but the stars are finally aligned and we're here, and I'm happy as hell, man. So, listen, you've recently got back from Dubai.
Yep.
It looked absolutely insane out there. The setup this year was like bigger and better than ever. What were your kind of views on the whole event? How do you think it kind of ran compared to last year? I know there's been a few technical hitches both years, but how do you feel the two have compared? Do you feel the comps got better this year?
Oh, definitely. The guys out in Dubai are fantastic, and they're really passionate about growing the sport, growing the event, and just making it bigger every year. And obviously this year was no exception. There, like you say, I mean, last year the show went on way, way too long. I think we didn't get back to the hotel till sort of 4 in the morning. It was just it was just not ideal for
Too
top
much.
level athletes. Yeah, I mean, obviously I had a good performance last year and I enjoyed the show, but I was glad to be a part of it this year as well. Obviously, kind of currently injured, not competing. It was nice to still be involved and be out there enjoying the whole experience because these guys, unlike any other show, I mean, we get looked after well at the Giants live shows and even like some of the other promoters, but these guys kind of went above and beyond to sort of make us feel comfortable. You got like proper, you felt like a real kind of legitimate top level athlete. You sort of put up in a really luxury hotel, getting picked up in fancy cars. My family were looked after the whole time, which is very unusual. Normally, it's just the athletes that get looked after. So, in kind of terms of the whole experience, it was brilliant. Guys brought their families with them. For me, that was a nice thing as well. I could take my family. If I was competing, I wouldn't have taken the kids with me, because obviously when you're competing, you kind of tunnel vision. You're focused on the job at hand. But obviously, I was just doing commentary this year, and I could just go and enjoy it, enjoy the experience, take the kids with me, and it doesn't matter if they're playing up because I'm not competing.
Yeah, 100%. And how does it feel being sat on this side of the fence this time, kind of looking in? Because I always feel like when you're in and amongst it, it's very much a different vibe than when you can kind of sit on the outside because you kind of see how things are playing out differently and you're not quite as emotionally attached. So how did that feel?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you're competing, you've just got kind of blinkers on and you're focused on one thing. Whereas I've got a bit of experience now on being kind of both sides of the kind of fence. Obviously competing as an athlete, but I've done a lot of work now the other side where you're sort of doing commentary, meet and greet stuff, and you're not sort of in there as an athlete. I've been to Britain's Strongest Man, Europe's, a lot of the big shows as competitors and more as like an analyst and kind of the behind the scenes stuff. So, and you realize how much goes into a show when you're not competing. When you're there as an athlete, literally, like I said, you want to know the events, you want to know the start time, you want to know warm up equipment, and that's it. You don't care about everything else that goes on behind the scenes. You don't care about the kind of problems going on. And I mean, just one of the problems these guys had, their internet provider was kind of messing them around just like before the show. And they had to spend about $1,000 on a satellite just to have some internet provided for the live stream at all. So, I didn't even know about that until afterwards because they're just running around trying to sort things out. And as promoters, things happen last minute. I've promoted a few smaller scale shows, and there's always issues going on when you're relying on other people to sort things out for you. It's always difficult, but they got through it. There's things that can definitely improve. There was a couple of issues maybe with like some of the weight selections on a few events that I personally thought need to change. If
Ah,
you're going to make,
would that be the yoke by any chance?
yep. Yeah, I mean, and I was one of the few people that kind of voiced my opinion on it beforehand, and the only reason being, I think if you're going to put that much effort into making such a good show, make sure everything is kind of spot on.
Yeah.
But it's minor things. The show was brilliant. The guys behind the show are so passionate and keen to make it bigger and better every year. They've got good investment to kind of back it with some decent money. I think right now it's the highest paid strongman show in terms of prize money, which is obviously going to be an appeal to all the guys. We all want to make money. That's just natural.
And in a sport like strongman where money isn't particularly out there, even a professional league, like when you kind of we go back to the beginning and you said that it was it felt like you were being treated like a legitimate athlete, and to be sat here and looking at you being like, but dude, you're so well known in Britain as a strongman. You're like literally a family face, and to still for strongman to still not be at a point where that is just the common ground is just so freaking bizarre. It must be
Yeah.
one of the only sports left now where you've got guys that are doing like bricklaying and plumbing during the week, and then they're like hopping off to like Central Europe to go and compete at like Ultimate Strongman Championship, and you're like, what? How are people doing this?
Well, it's crazy. I mean, I've been lucky enough to see the growth of strongman since I started, obviously, to where we're at now, where we're starting to get to a more professional kind of level. But I mean, when I started, I worked 3 jobs. People kind of say, "Oh, you're so lucky, you're a professional strongman," blah blah blah. When I started out, I was working 3 jobs. I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning, working different jobs, training in the afternoon, and I just did it because I loved it. No other reason at all. There was no ambition to be like a professional or anything like that because there just wasn't any money in the sport, other than maybe getting to World's Strongest Man and winning that. I think back then, if you won World's Strongest Man, it's probably about $30,000 or $40,000 to win World's Strongest Man.
Bloody hell.
If you didn't get through your group, you would have lost money being there. It's and that's the pinnacle of the sport. I think when I first won Britain's Strongest Man, I got a grand for winning it. So nothing wrong with winning a grand. It's a nice little extra bonus, but you're not going to make a living off that. Whereas now they're starting to get a bit more professionalism in the sport. Some of the very top guys can do it full time now. There's more kind of companies involved in the sport as well. Back when I started, there was no equipment makers and stuff like that. It was people just making up their own kit in a yard somewhere. There was no like loadable equipment, and the nice kind of stuff we have now in almost like most commercial gyms have some form of strongman equipment, whether it's like some loadable farmers or something or a log. Most gyms now, maybe a sandbag, have like some of the basic stuff, and obviously you can pretty much get anything you want built now.
Yeah.
And there's companies, Cerberus, the SBD, companies back in the sport that are actually investing at Rogue with the Arnolds. There's money going into it now, and hopefully for like the next generation of guys, it's going to get better and better and better. But yeah, certainly when I started, it was just a bit of fun. I just loved training, always have, still love training now, and it was just like a personal challenge to see how good I could get.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting that you say that because I feel like if it's a case of that you can't physically be in it for the money because the money isn't there, I feel like then it has to come from a place of passion. And I think if it comes from a place of passion, then you're so much more willing to succeed. I think there's going to be more people that as the sport progresses, you're going to have those people that are in it because they're going, oh, like I see the lifestyle that Eddie Hall's leading now. This looks really cool. And it's like, you don't understand, buddy,
There's
to
too
get
many
to that.
people doing that right now. I see it too much on social media where too many people think they're going to become rich and famous from doing strongman. If you want to be rich and famous, do something else because there's much easier ways of doing it.
Yeah. Take all the money you have, go into a casino and put it on a number because you've got just as much chance there as you do anything else.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way I kind of, describe, other than kind of like now where you've got maybe the Stoltmans that are sort of getting to that level, Graham Hicks is sort of at that level a bit now. For the last 10 years, you've had like myself, Terry Hollands, and Eddie Hall are the only 3 guys that could legitimately call themselves professional strength athletes. It's starting to improve a bit now. You've got like Tom Stoltman getting to that kind of level. Hicksy still works, but he's not sort of making a name for himself now as well. Luke still works, but he's making a name for himself. But there's not many guys that can legitimately say, they're an Eddie Hall or a Thor Bjornsson. And even those guys have used the fame that they've got in other ways. Thor's made his money more through Game of Thrones than he has through Strongman. Sure, he's won some great prize money and stuff, but not legitimate kind of money that's going to set you up for life. So I still feel right now you're better off. I get guys all the time. Oh, how do I get sponsored? What can I want to be a professional athlete? How do I get sponsored? And they're not even at a level where it's worth even thinking about sponsorship. I'm not saying if someone offers you some free stuff or things, don't take it. By all means, take it and help yourself. If you're going to get free stuff, look at things like food recovery treatments. If you can get like a free massage once a week or something like that, those are the things I would go for over supplements, to be honest. But yeah, I would tell any kid out there, get a job, do this as a hobby, and progress. If you do progress to that kind of level, then you kind of you'll get there, and you'll appreciate it more anyway because you've got that kind of you understand the value of money. Whereas too many people now want everything handed to them on a plate. They just want to be given it. And I'm not saying everyone, but I see a lot of it. And it's frustrating because I know how hard it is, at the very top level. And I think some people are sort of misguided on what kind of being a pro strongman is all about.
Yeah, well, I think you've just got to look at it. I'm lucky in the sense that I can reflect on being a competitive strongman from a grassroots level as that you've just got to look at the numbers in the novice category versus the inters versus the open versus elite. Do you know what I mean? When you've got 30, 40 competitors at a novice level, but yet you've got maybe 2 guys that are turning up for the opens competition, it's a case of all of the guys that don't have it just get weeded out because you cannot sustain it at that level when you're putting your body through that every single week. You've got to love it.
Yeah, you have. I mean, people always ask me why I keep coming back from injuries and stuff like that, and the honest answer is I love training. I love challenging myself. I love what I do, and because I've always loved it, I'm not afraid to sort of sit down and kind of work out ways to improve, get better, look at new ways of recovery, look at improving technique. I'm always like, analyzing stuff and trying to improve and think about why things happened, et cetera, et cetera. And I think if I just sort of gave up, I have to have some kind of challenge. I challenge myself in lots of different ways, but strength training is just something that I'm passionate about. And I've always been, even since a young kid, just fascinated with strength and, big, powerful guys like superheroes, that kind of thing. And, it's funny because I watch the old strongman and the shows, and I kind of look up to them, and they're like my heroes. Whereas now they're just my competitors, so I don't care so much. But I still kind of like. I met Magnus Samuelsson a few months back, who I actually was lucky enough to compete against in one of my first internationals. But I got a chance to really sit down with him, and he was one of my heroes growing up. So it was quite cool to meet him, and he was a really cool guy with it. So it was nice.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's really interesting kind of when you look back now. I was speaking to Craig Tolley about this when we did our podcast, and you look at the strong men that people kind of really idolize, like the Jeff Capes and all that lot. When you look at the weights that they were pushing up then, which was just groundbreaking at that time, you never ever saw that, and yet you're not even opening with that weight. You're opening with heavier weights than those guys were competing with now. Yeah. It's just freaking crazy the level that we've got to now. Where do you think it goes from here?
I still think strongman's a young sport and it's going to keep evolving. I've really noticed the last sort of year the standards jumped up again. I think guys like Hafthor took it to another level, and then you've got like these young freaks like Kilias Koski coming through now. The Strongman brothers have both stepped up this year. They're doing exceptionally well. You've got guys like Lissis, who's unbelievable. And there's just, there's so many amazing strongmen out. There's always been good guys in the past, but now you've got so many good guys that compete. And it's just getting harder and harder. I still think at his best, if he's injury-free, Thor's the number one guy in the world right now. But then I'd probably put Kilias Koski as number 2, which might be controversial, because I think he can just compete and still be good. Whereas Lissis, I think, needs to prepare very well for shows. Yeah, I think he's an exceptional athlete, but he needs that preparation time. Whereas I think Kilias Koski, you could just chuck him in a comp and he'll do well.
And I feel like with Lissis is that his body needs to be in good condition. Like he needs to have a good run up. He needs to be injury free.
He's naturally a smaller guy. He's extremely dedicated and smart with his training and motivated, but he's not that freak of nature like those guys. And it's motivating to see how well he's done, but he certainly needs that recovery time and the smart training to peak at certain times.
So how do you think the road to Thor's return is going to pan out? Obviously, Kilias Koski now with slight bicep tear from was Ultimate Strongman over in Dubai. How do you think it fares now? Is it kind of level playing fields now? We've got Lissis getting over injury now, Kilias and Thor. It's kind of like, oh well, this is now opening the door again for someone else to step in.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think that's just natural for strongman, especially these days. The comps are so heavy, firstly, and there's a lot of competitions as well. And you just cannot stay at your best all year round. You know, we've seen that clearly this year with various people getting injured, people having to miss competitions, have time off. I think now you'd be stupid to try and compete in everything. You know, it's too hard to, especially as you get older. I think you've seen like Novikov has just done absolute everything this year.
I was literally about to say, I feel like someone needs to be showing this to Novikov because I feel like he's done every single competition every weekend for like the past like 8 months. It's
I made
ridiculous.
that mistake early on in my career, and you know, if I could have talked to my younger self, I would have made sure I didn't do that. I even remember having a conversation with Eddie when he was like on the way up. I was saying, don't do the same thing that me and Terry did. You know, pick your shows, be smart about it, peak for certain shows, and you know, he did that, and he was smart with it. The guys that compete regularly end up destroying themselves. You know, you look at like Krzysztof Radzikowski, who competes all the time. He's struggling big time
It's
now.
like Frankenstein now.
Belsak's the same. You know, he's got some serious issues that he's struggling with. There's a handful of guys like that, and then there's loads of guys that just come and go because they've done so many comps. Within 2 or 3 years, they're finished. I think now you've got to really be smart. You've got to look after your body. It's something I sort of push on a lot of my clients. I've got a lot of youngsters that I'm training, and they all want to compete all the time, and I'm not letting them. And they think I'm being horrible and mean half the time, but it's really not that. I'm trying to protect them and prolong their careers and make sure they have that time in between competitions to actually make some progress. Because sometimes when you're just competing all the time, you're just trying to recover from show to show and just get yourself ready for a show. You don't have time to improve weaknesses and get better. It's why now I'm sort of a lot more patient. To prolong my career, I'm quite happy to miss shows, you know, and all right, I'm injured right now, but I'm happy to miss shows and you know, peak for certain times rather than just compete in everything.
Yeah, it's almost like you don't have that FOMO anymore. It's not a case of that you're constantly like, oh well, I need to do this show because I need to do this and this and this.
I remember when I was younger, I thought, you know, if I missed a show, that would be it. You know, you've forgotten about. But one thing I have learned is that I don't mean this in a nasty way, but people are quite fickle and forget things very, very quickly. So, you know, once one show's done, we just move on to the next one, and the last one's forgotten about. So I've learned now that it really doesn't matter. You've only got to do it for yourself. I'm not trying to impress anyone else. I'm
Yeah,
competing to do it, and I love it. And I still believe I'm capable of doing some good things, but I've got to be smart with it now. You know, I'm 37 in December. I've been doing this a long time, so I'm still not like in terms of age. I've still got kind of a few more years, but I've been doing it a long time, so my body's gone through the mill, if you like.
yeah.
But I think it's if I'm smart, pick 1 or 2 shows a year, I can prolong my career for another few years, yeah, and just keep enjoying it. I sort of I feel if I'm going to compete, I want to compete at a high level and certainly be able to hit PBs. Winning shows is always great, but if I'm not performing at my best, then I'm going to lose interest. So for me, I don't want to sort of do, you know, there's no point in me turning up to like an open comp in the UK, competing against some up and coming guys and being happy that I win that show, you know, even though it's 20% off my best. I've got no interest in doing that. I'd rather compete against the best guys in the world, legitimately kind of, you know, hit PBs and still be competitive, or it's time for me to stop and I'll focus on training some of the youngsters. So I've got to see how I recover from injuries and stuff like that. But if I can't do that, then I've got no interest in just making up numbers and just going to shows for the sake of it.
So, when Big Loz is choosing which competitions to do, what's on the list? What are you looking at? What's your yearly selection? How are you planning that?
So the big shows that I will look at are things like Europe's Strongest Man. Obviously, you know, I'm quite fond of that one. And the competition in Dubai is another kind of comp that appeals to me. Um, I'd like to have another crack at the British at some point. I'm not going to be able to do it in January just because it's going to be way too soon in terms of me being competitive. And some people will say, "Oh, you're kind of scared," or you know. Honestly, I'm not scared in
They're
the.
also stupid, so they
Yeah,
can shut
honestly,
the fuck up.
well, I mean, because I'm not going to. I've got food coming. Thank you.
It's okay.
So I've got no interest in turning up, making up numbers. I know right now I'm not good enough to be competitive. I don't need to prove that, you know. And I'd rather give someone else, one of the up and coming guys, that spot. So you know, it gives someone else that opportunity. If I'm going to go there and be competitive, and be at my best, that's a different thing, a different matter completely. But I was told initially it's going to take me a year to sort of recover from my Achilles. I've entered Tattooed and Strong, which is a push-pull powerlifting contest, in March to give me something to train for. There's no movement involved. Feet planted on the floor, I'm absolutely fine, so I can start building up some kind of like deadlift strength soon, and benching's fine. But it's going to be coming to the moving events, the overhead, like where you're sort of push pressing and you're getting that explosive type movement. That's going to take a bit of time. Confidence on yoke and farmer's walk is going to take time, and things like truck pull is going to be very scary. So I can't rush those things. I need to get my strength up first, and then hopefully maybe summertime I can look at competing in a strongman competition again.
100%. So when you're now looking at those competitions, do you think it's now going to be a case of that you're going to want to choose competitions that are going to have less of an impact on those areas of weakness? So kind of picking and choosing, saying, okay, well, actually this competition, this has this pull, it has a really heavy yoke, and actually maybe that might not just be the smartest move. Maybe it's better for me to just taper it back.
I'll definitely have to look at events, and it's one I've said openly. I'm probably not going to compete at World's Strongest Man again. I want them to change a few things, but since I've said it, it's kind of made me relax a bit more about competition, because I'm not focused on winning World's Strongest Man anymore. I can openly say that I've backed off and focusing more on coaching athletes and just enjoying my training. And obviously with Worlds, you kind of don't know the events till quite late. Sometimes I change things last minute, and that's fine. I've been used to that for years. It's not an issue. But I think because of the stage I'm at in my career, I want to be able to sort of pick and choose the shows that I do a bit more, try and find events that I would love for my foot to improve enough to really have a crack at maybe a yoke or the car walk world record again, because Kiliaskowski obviously beat my car walk world record this year. I have only done the car walk twice, and both times I broke the world record. So the last time I did the car walk was in 2016. I'd love another crack at it. But again, I've got to see how I improve, because I tried a 100-kilo yoke a few weeks ago and I was terrible. So it's not really realistic at the moment, but I feel if I can recover and train for it, it was something I'd like an opportunity to do. I still want to try and put a 200-kilo log overhead in contest. I still got a goal of trying to deadlift 1,000 pounds in a strongman competition. So I've got personal targets that I want to focus on rather than just winning shows at the moment.
Yeah, well, and I think it's also been proved with guys like Hicksy. They're kind of going off, having these big major surgeries, coming back and saying, look, I'm giving myself, kind of, we spoke to Delroy McQuinn on here not too long ago, and saying, we're going to give ourselves 3 years, and each year we're going to do this, we're going to go up a stage, and we're going to be smart about our programming, and we're not going to say, right, I want to be back competing at world's strongest man level within the first 18 months, because then you just rush your body, you pick up more injuries along the way, and actually if you just take a bit longer.
Powerlifting show, and I'm not even going to pick crazy numbers. I just want to go there, and my goal will be to beat what I did in 2015. I think it was 2016 I did it, didn't I?
What was that?
Tattooed and Strong.
Yes, 2016.
So 2016 I did Tattooed and Strong, and I won it that year, and I think I benched 210 and deadlifted 385. So my goal is just to creep up on those numbers. I'm not going to do anything kind of crazy. I feel I'm capable of a lot more at my best, but whether I can get there that quickly is another matter. So now I'm just kind of focusing. I'm actually competing in the under 140 class to give myself a target to lose some body weight. I sort of feel like I've been lazy since it's literally this week I've started. I sort of entered on the weekend. I was like, right, I need a target to give me some motivation to get into the gym and be good with my nutrition and eating. And it's, I'm always better with a goal. So doing the powerlifting, I can control the numbers. Whereas in a strongman show, numbers are set. If it's a 600-kilo yoke, you got to get under a 600-kilo yoke, whether you can do it or not. Whereas in a powerlifting comp, I can pick my numbers, I can adjust them if I need to, depending on how training's gone. And it's just a competitive environment, but without the crushing kind of events that you have in strongman.
It just goes to show, ladies and gents, how ridiculous strongman is. That the fact that you're entering powerlifting competitions as a break and to ease your body gently back into strongman, you're going to go through a powerlifting meet. That's just how utterly ridiculous the strain and stress on your body is.
With Hixie, and you've seen what he's just done at Big Dogs.
Wow, by the way, I mean Hixie. Oh my god, incredible numbers, man. Incredible.
But it just shows what strong men are capable of. And I love powerlifting. I love all strength sports, to be honest. But without question, I think the strongest men on the planet are strong men. It's their ability to adapt to so many different things. We have to squat on a slanted car park flooring in a rack that you can hardly get your hands in. Whereas a powerlifter wants a perfect flat floor with a monolift and perfect kind of environment, and that's I totally respect what they can do. But honestly, if we're talking raw strength, I think strongmen are the best. They're so good at so many things.
Yeah, it's just a multifaceted sport, isn't it? You can't be weak anywhere.
1,000 kilos, in a powerlifting comp, no problem. Whereas I don't think there's that many guys totaling 1,000 kilos that in powerlifting that could cross over to a strongman contest. Well, there's certainly many.
Especially with the mobile exercises, just the trunk strength that you have to have, and the power in your hips as well. As strong as powerlifters are, it is all static weight, and yeah, it's going to transition across. But I tell you what, you can move a deadlift is good, but
powerlifting. I genuinely do love it, but I just think strongman's harder, and that's why I'm doing strong powerlifting to ease myself back into competition.
So with your weight, where are you currently sat at now? And in your head, what are you aiming to get to?
So I've entered the under 140 kilo class. I weighed myself on Monday and I was 161 kilos. So I've got 21 kilos to lose. But realistically, it's more getting to about 145 and then probably water cutting to make weight.
Yeah, 100%.
When I deadlifted 435 in 2014, I weighed 142 kilos. So at that kind of weight, my deadlift normally is better because mechanically I'm more efficient.
So is that just because you don't have the extra weight getting in the way? It's easier to get into your position in the hole and set up.
Squat and my pressing when my weight comes down, but my deadlift normally gets a little bit better.
That's very interesting, and I think it's interesting to kind of talk about this now that we're seeing this transition again. I'm speaking about it again with the aesthetics coming into strongman. It's a case of these big barreled gigantic men aren't quite so common anymore, and we're getting these young chiseled athletes that are coming through that are kind of bringing a different crowd and a different attention.
I think because the professionalism is improving so much, guys are taking everything a little bit more seriously. I mean, I'm sat here eating steak, asparagus, and oven cooked chips, which for a strongman is all right. Some people say you shouldn't be having chips, but oven cooked chips for a strongman. You need carbs and you need protein, but it's the things I need to avoid are sugary type things. That's what doesn't kind of help me in terms of my lifting, and I just tend to get fat when I focus on those. And that's what I've done since I got injured. I've lost focus on my nutrition, just eating what I want, eating less quality food and less food in general, but got fatter.
Yeah, and also you're not training as much, you're not putting your body through all of those stresses that you would have done usually. You're not getting your heart rate up as much, you're not getting out of breath as much because you don't have the physical mechanical capability to do that. Especially because it's your lower body as well. If this was a wrist or something that you'd still be able to do like belt squats or something, it's a different story, man. But when you're talking about lower body, it's so hard, and that's why like the road back from injury is so difficult, because mechanically with an ankle or an Achilles, everything's on top of that. You've got to make sure that the structure in the knee is still there. You've got to make sure that's tracking properly. You've got to make sure the hips are healthy.
Definitely,
and it's not easy.
The hardest kind of injuries to recover from, and I'm still kind of early days, but mentally it's very, very difficult.
And is that just because you feel like you want to be doing stuff and you can't, or what?
Yeah, I'm impatient. Well, I'm not too bad. I know people that are a lot worse, but obviously, when you're at a certain strength level, you like being at that strength level. And kind of, right now I feel like I'm a pipsqueak. I'm clearly not, but in terms of my top level strength, I have to be patient and I have to understand that it's going to take time to get back to that level.
It's so amazing, isn't it? Like, I know that you say that, but it's so funny because I sit here and I think about stuff like that, and I'm like, oh, if I'm having a really bad time, and I'm like, oh man, I can't deadlift today. I'm so weak. I'm so pathetic. And then I'm like, that's so strange because the fact that you're saying the exact same thing, but yet the weight that you're struggling on is probably like well over my max, and it's just all about perspective. Do you know what I mean? It's so ridiculous. Yeah. And then I'm sure there's some guy that's trying to pick up an empty bar that's going, Jesus Christ, this is so heavy. How do you do this? And it's like, man, even the strongest men in the world have this problem.
It's all relative, and that's, like it goes back to me saying earlier, I could go and compete in like an intermediate or an open level competition, and yeah, I'd be fine. But that doesn't interest me. I want to be at my best. So, I could go and squat 320 or deadlift 320, and you can compete okay at a certain level. But you bring a 320 squat to an open, an international level comp, you may as well not go out there because 400 is the opener usually these days. It's just the standard is just insane at that top level.
It's mad. It's absolutely mad. And I think it's really interesting because as the sport's growing, we're getting people that are coming across from all different walks of life, and we're finding about all these different freaks that are creeping out from rocks across the world that we're finding about, guys like Iron Bibby that are coming out of, this desolate land. He's got absolutely nothing to his name, and yet this guy comes out of absolutely nowhere and blows everyone's mind. Is just the most genetically gifted man I think has ever seen strength sports. I mean, if this guy has just an ounce of coaching behind him, I think I don't understand how he can't do incredible things.
I would genuinely love to coach that man. I just feel with a small amount of technical kind of improvements, he will be a freak of nature.
What do you feel like he's missing? What do you feel like his major downfalls are? Because I feel like that there are a few areas that kind of tend to keep on cropping up for him, but I'm really interested to hear what you have to say from a coach's
firstly, his
perspective.
deadlift is in terms of top level strength, is weak. That's his deadlift, but with legs like his, deadlifting's not easy. And if you watch him deadlift, he's actually very powerful off the floor. He just has ridiculously big legs, and he just needs a little bit of tinkering with technique to help him lift in a style that suits him. Where he really kind of lacks right now is, firstly, technique on everything. He's just raw power. When you watch him on overhead, like dumbbell pressing or anything, he lifts with brute strength. There's no finesse, and there's no kind of, I don't see much kind of thought process into his kind of training. I just think he's just a freak of nature that just picks up weights and lifts them. Even when you watch him on like his log lifting and stuff like that, it's just brute strength again, shoulder power, tricep power. There's no thought in terms of using your whole body and
proper farmer boy style, like yeah.
I'm kind of completely methodical in terms of my training. Every single rep from the first warm-up set has to be the same, and that's something I kind of try and get into all my clients, is making sure they understand everything needs to be working together, whether it's set number one or if I make someone push press, I don't want them strict pressing up until 100 kilos. I'll get them push pressing from the start, so you practice the whole mechanics of the movement. And I just think he needs a bit of that. He needs a year of kind of maximizing that strength because he's ridiculously strong. I've never seen a man press 200 kilos without warming up before.
Well, it's everything as well. It's his unreal frame, the way that he can carry his body, the fact that he is so agile and he's so mobile. And you're talking about the 200 kilo overhead press. I mean, it was basically him lifting it off of his chest and then him limboing under the bar and then standing up with the bar. I mean, he almost bent in half
to try and get into that position. But a little bit of kind of work in terms of glute power, core strength, and overhead stability, I reckon he'll be like 240 overhead. He's got crazy potential. He needs to improve in terms of fitness. His fitness has been a little bit of a factor in some competitions.
Massively. He's lost a lot of points through those.
Yeah, and just kind of basic kind of lack of training on certain things. Certain events, you can just see he doesn't know what he's doing. I've seen him on the dumbbell, which is something he's very strong at. But if you watch, say, Achilles Kovsky, who's very, again, methodical, technically, very efficient on something like that. If he had that kind of technique, it's crazy to think what he could do with those type of events. And I just think it's just kind of tidying up a little bit in certain areas. He's going to really step up a few levels.
Yeah, it's quite phenomenal to think, when you give these guys a few years. I think for a guy like Bibby, although he has all of this strength and he has the ability, I feel like for him it makes sense to maybe take a year out or 18 months out, work really, really hard with a coach, spend a bit of time over here or get a coach out there to work with him and just say, look, let's really batten down the hatches. Let's get to work on your technique. Let's get a few pounds off of you, because although he's big, I think if he drops a few kilos, it's only going to help.
I spoke to him about his diet, and he'll literally eat 1 or 2 meals a day. That's it. And you just think, as a professional athlete, how are you 180 kilos to start with? And in terms of fueling your workouts and stuff like that, it just doesn't make sense. But he's just a freak of nature.
Is someone injecting him with sugar water in his sleep? That's utterly absurd. Jesus, yes. I would hate to see the size of those meals. It's like a small cow on a plate for each one.
Well, he's honestly a lovely guy with it as well. You see these freaks of nature, he is just genuinely a really, really nice guy with it.
Yeah, so sweet. And I think that's another thing that just so many of the strongmen fit that bill of just big, friendly giants. Look scary, look terrifying from the outside, and then you speak to them and you're like, oh my god, you're just a big softie, really, aren't you? This is ridiculous. It's like a secret that no one wants to tell. So funny. It's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. We've got Britain's coming up. We've got lots and lots and lots of contenders coming into the mix now, and I feel like every year it's a competition that's just it in and of itself is becoming a little bit crazy. We've got
sorry, you broke up. Speaking up a little bit. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's all good. I have a very funny feeling it's because my girlfriend's probably on Netflix, but hey.
It broke up a second.
It's all good. Right, is that better?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, that seems good.
Cool. So, Britain's this year, I feel like there is a ton of contention. You've got lots and lots of names that are going into the hat now, and I feel like every year it's a case of the previous year names stay there, and we just keep on adding more athletes into the top contender spot. I mean, how do you even pick it going into this year?
I think it's going to be between 3 guys for the title.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of guys that can do very well. And certainly be fighting for the top 5 positions. But I think the top 3 is going to be between the Strongman brothers and Bish. I think in terms of they've got the experience, the events that I've been told suit the 3 of them. And there's a lot of other guys that are good at certain events. But I think those 3 will be the guys contending for the title. And between the 3, I couldn't tell you who I think will win. I think it's going to be a hell of a battle.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I think it's really nice that we're at a point now where we're getting these competitions where there isn't a clear favourite going in. You can back anyone, but realistically, on the day with the correct conditions, you can have people pulling it out of the bag. And I think we saw that with, performances like Ben Brunning's recently, just coming out of nowhere and just showing that, on a good day with the events that suit you, it is anyone's game and you cannot take your foot off the pedal for a second in the sport.
If you can kind of perform at your best and someone makes a mistake or something like that, I beat Thor, Europe's strongest man. I wouldn't go around saying I'm better than him. But I was awesome on that day. He made a mistake and I capitalised on it.
Hell yeah.
And that's sport, we don't know who's going to win. People sometimes get upset with me with my predictions and stuff, but that's the fun thing about sport. We don't know who's going to win. If we did, it would be boring. We're all entitled to our opinions, and I've got my opinions of who I think will do well at Britain's. Thinking about the events, I think the log could be a big factor for Bish because there's so many good log lifters competing. If he can't score big points on that, it's going to cost him. but there's weaknesses for all three of like the big names. I mean, Luke's deadlift is probably a little bit of a weakness. I think at British level, it's not so much of a weakness. It's
At
more in like
international level, yeah.
But there's always kind of mistakes that can be made on events, and you've got to perform on the day. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's whoever shows up and wants it and is hungry for it, and I think that's the thing that we've seen out of the Stoltman brothers, is that they've really come into their own in terms of that they look like they really want it now. And Tom is super, super hungry. He has the potential there. He has Luke behind him. And I think this year is the year where he has really kind of gone into a league of his own. He's worked super hard in the off season, and I think I'm really excited to see where he is next season. Because I honestly think that if he can double up like he has done this season, dude, I think he can easily be pushing up the same numbers as Thor can.
Oh, he's got to stay consistent, physique, hasn't he? He's got the height, the build, and the confidence is growing now. I felt like people put too much pressure on him a few years ago, and he needed that time to progress, and he's done that this year. This year and the last year, he's really gone away and worked hard. I think the best thing that happened to him, he did badly at the Brits 2 years ago, and he sort of was disappointed with it, but he went away and worked hard, and he's come back, unbelievably good. His build is just awesome. I mean, you watch him lift stones, it's just like they're toys. He throws them up like they're nothing. His deadlift strength has improved. His pressing strength's improved. Other than his grip, there's no big gaping weakness in his performance anymore. And to be fair, he reminds me of Thor, because Thor's grip was weak for a while. And he went away, and, then Thor became the freak that we all know him to be. And Tom's got that potential to be that kind of level.
What does he need?
Just a couple more years of training.
So you think it's just a time thing? You think he just needs to mature in the sport? He needs to get a few more high-level comps under his belt, working around these guys?
10 kilos here or there on his lifts, which comes with time. He's still very, very young. Making sure he doesn't get injured is going to be a big key factor. I'd say grip needs a bit of work, but then again, it depends if the events are going to involve grip or not. We had a period of time where there was no grip events at all for years. So it just depends. They've kind of come back in a bit now, and it's given someone like Mark Felix a revival. But we had like 5 or 6 years where there was just no grip events. So it all depends on events with so many of the guys. I've said that many times. I mean, I feel with the right events, I can compete against anyone in the world. I feel Terry Hollands with the right events can compete against anyone in the world. Yeah. Mark Felix can. The guys that separate themselves are the guys like Thor, Brian Shaw, Zadrunas, where it doesn't matter what events you throw at them, they're still the best guys in the world. And that's that's when you're really one of the absolute best guys. When you can just have any event thrown at you and you can compete. For me, I'm not at that level. I need the right events. If there's a yoke and farmers walk, grip events, squats, deadlifts, I'm good with those type of events. Even like if I'm going to press, I'd rather have like a Viking press or an axle as opposed to like a log or say a dumbbell. With Thor, Brian Shaw, Zadrunas at his best, it really didn't matter what event they throwed it. They're just that good at everything.
Yeah.
And these guys that like Tom, I think Tom, Luke, Bish, Hicksey, they've all beaten each other this year at different events. It all comes down to the event selection and who's the best on the day.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to be a real battle, and I think next season is. It's really, really exciting because I think we're going to get to a point now where everyone can go away and they have a few months to work on the injuries and people can get the rehabilitation that they need, because especially towards the end of the season it just becomes a little bit of a mess. And it's not always necessarily a case of who is the strongest man, but it is who is the less injured man. And I think that's one area that from an outside perspective I feel like needs to kind of be looked at, and I feel like there needs to be some kind of not governing body, but I feel like there needs to be some overarching sense of different people setting up time frames for competitions and saying, we've got this here, we've got this here, we've got this here. I feel like we're getting months where there's like you're hitting like 2 or 3 major international competitions in 1 month, and then you're going 1 month maybe you have 1, and then the next month you have 3, and you're like, organisers just need to communicate, because it's bad for the sport, because then people aren't performing on the day at events, which doesn't make the events look as popular.
You get guys at the Giants Live guys set their dates a year in advance, so we know when we know when the Brits is, we know when the Europe Strongest Man is, we know when the competition at the Royal Albert Hall is, we know when Manchester is. They've all been set. Whereas World's Strongest Man will throw their competition. They'll give us like 3 months notice, sometimes less than that. And, like this year, World's Strongest Man was just like a few weeks before the competition in Wembley. So it's difficult for the guys, but as an athlete, I think you just got to select what you want to do. I guess like being like a fighter or something like that. You can't be competing all the time. You've got to be selective, pick the shows that you feel are going to benefit you the most and give you the most recognition, I guess. And there's so many promoters now as well, which makes things awkward again. But it's a very difficult situation. You can't really have a governing body because there's 3 or 4 various different kind of promoters out there, or organisations promoting shows. But I think as long as it's entertaining the crowds, as long as people have the free will to compete where they want, it's not too much of an issue. We've got to focus more on being an entertaining sport rather than like an Olympic sport. I don't think Strongman's ever going to kind of go down that route. I think it's better going down the sort of UFC, WWE style, promotions, if you like, competing in arenas and having,
big
genuine
crowds and big audiences, and it's a case of the people come out to see personalities.
Yeah, having those personalities makes it interesting. That's what people, want to see. If you just did 10 guys lifting a weight, and it all the same.
It's like a powerlifting meet.
Yeah.
Which, if you've ever seen them, they don't look particularly interesting most of the time.
What is watch a grip competition.
That's basically Rob Frampton's timeline at the moment, isn't it?
I'm going to go down and train with Rob soon and do some grip together.
Man, that would be awesome. I love that. Love that. So with the competitions, there are... So going through it in my head, you've got like the World Ultimate Strongman, which you just come back from in Dubai. You've kind of got the promoters like Glenn with UK's, the Giants Live guys, and then is the official Strongman? Are they paired with the World's Strongest Man Touchy Palace stuff? Is that technically one company, or are they two?
They're more paired with the Giants Live guys.
Okay, so that's the official Strongman is the feeder through into the Giants Live, and then the World's Strongest Man is just invite only?
No. It's Giants Live shows are qualifiers for World's Strongest Man.
Okay.
But the organisations are nothing to do with each other. They just
This
work
is what
together.
confuses me, because there's no actual linking connection. It's just people
also,
going.
What also confuses people is the TV line when it's shown on TV in kind of December, because there's no real continuity in terms of when things actually happened. So it can be quite confusing. But yeah, World's Strongest Man is run by a TV company called IMG. So they're top of the food chain. World's Strongest Man is, that's the show everyone wants to be at, or certainly they did.
That's an interesting point, Laurence. We're going to have to hop off here. Why is that? So, because I've spoken to loads of people behind the scenes, and I'm not going to name names and I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but I have heard on the grapevine that World's Strongest Man is not the same title, and it doesn't hold the same kind of name that it did, just because of the way that the competitions are being run. There are lots of things that can be done better.
I don't want to kind of come across as bitching about World's Strongest Man, because it's been great to me and it's given me an opportunity to compete. And genuinely, I was a huge fan of World's Strongest Man before I ever competed there.
It was the one, wasn't it? That was the start.
World's Strongest Man is it's not growing with the times in terms of, the sport is growing. World's Strongest Man should be trying to grow with it. And I feel, unfortunately, it's a TV company at the end of the day, and it's budgeted. They get a set budget. They've only got a certain amount of money to play with. Unfortunately, that's reduced this year, so things aren't as good as they could have been. But they need to be able to sell their product to different kind of TV companies and countries to make money from it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because then you've got Colin and the guys over at Giants Live, which are going down the other route of doing the live streams, the pay-per-views. They've got the official Strongman. Obviously, if you guys haven't got your subscription already, that's an awesome site to go and watch all of those shows on there too.
In this day and age, that's the way to go. Who wants to wait till Christmas to watch a strongman show that, like, if you think we're not gonna see Britain's Strongest Man from this year until December,
Almost 12 months after it's happened.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Can you imagine the FA Cup final being shown 11 months after it kind of happened, or like the 100-meter final at the Olympics? It's just stupid, and I don't agree with it, especially with, back when there was 4 channels, it was a little bit different. And there was no internet to find out results. And World's Strongest Man was basically like Gladiators. It was a TV show that, the Gladiators just happened, for a few weeks of a year, and they recorded it all, and then they put it out on TV, ITV, over, a set period of time. And World's Strongest Man was like that for a long time. It was literally big, strong freaks from different sports getting together and having a crack at this kind of crazy competition. Whereas now, strongman is a sport that is, you get from grassroots level right up to the elite. There's big kind of promoters. You've got the comps like the Arnolds. You've got the WUS competition. A handful of other kind of competitions throughout the year. The Giants live shows. There's loads of big shows. People always say to me, people that don't know about the sport, they're like, "Oh, you're going to do strongman again," not realizing that I compete throughout the year in different shows. They just kind of think it's that TV show on at Christmas. But strongman has evolved from that. And when you look at sports like CrossFit and other sports that have done so well in the kind of same kind of eventy type things that we do in strongman, I think we need to be kind of copying those type of kind of plans rather than sticking with the same thing that we when World's Strongest Man was popular on channel or BBC One back in the 80s and that kind of time, you had 20 million people viewing like Jeff Capes win World's Strongest Man. But now 20 million people don't watch one channel. They'll watch TV when they want to watch it. They'll watch kind of live streams. They'll do pay-per-views, like you say. If you're interested in a sport, and I think that's the way it needs to go. You look at the UFC, the way they do things and the way they've kind of grown the UFC over the last 10 years is incredible.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting that you use the name CrossFit there, because that's another thing that I've kind of spoken to Rob about before and kind of said, where do you think that this is going? And he's even mentioned, I think the direction that we're looking at is we're looking at these big arenas where you've got, it's not just like head to head, but it's very similar to the kind of the team championships that we had on not too long ago. The whole kind of concept that maybe instead of having 2 people running farmers, you've got 6, 8, 10, 12 competitors. Yeah. You've got pools of like 20, 30 of literally the strongest men in the world that are just battling it out.
I'd like to see World's Strongest Man get rid of the groups, have 20 guys there, 20 best guys in the world, and go head to head over 8 or 10 events.
And just do it on points?
Yeah. So 20 points for first, 1 point for last. Then you have nowhere to hide. You can't set up event or competitions to favour certain athletes because there's too many events to kind of, protect yourself. And you genuinely then find out who's the best guy in the world. I don't feel with 5 events you can decide who the best in the world is. If you look at sports like snooker or darts, the short formats are great and you get a lot of shock results in the short formats, but the longer formats is where you find the best players tend to win. And that's I'd like to see the same in strongman. And I'm certainly not saying it would benefit me. I just think as an athlete and as a fan, you're going to get a genuine competition. There's more chance for characters and people to shine on certain events that they're good at. You get some athletes that are great log lifters, but they're not so good at other things. And the way World's Strongest Man is shown at the moment, if you're not fighting for for that title, you could win an event and they might not show you on TV because you're not in the contention in terms of overall, top 3.
Yeah, which is obviously completely wrong and not really kind of.
A few years ago, they didn't show Mike Burke's overhead, and I think he won it or he was second on it.
That's just mental. It's absolutely mental. So what do you? Because the thing is, obviously, you have so many different competitions in terms of, you have your Arnolds, your UKs, you have all of this sort of stuff, and each competition I feel like has, like, they have their own following, but they also have like their own places in every strongman's heart. And I feel like that, as much as World's Strongest Man the title as the world's strongest man, people don't always necessarily feel like the world's strongest man dictates who the strongest man in the world actually is. And we've looked back at previous years where, you know, the Arnolds have been surmountably heavier than the competitions that we've had at World's Strongest Man, and people have kind of said, well, you know, realistically, you know, this is the most weight being lifted. Is this the true test of strength? So for you, where is your ranking of those competitions, and what are the ones that if you could hop into a competition and just smash it, which title is the one that is going to mean the most to you?
Right. In terms of titles, World's Strongest Man is still number one. Those are the most impact in terms of titles to have, because who doesn't want to call themselves the world's strongest man? Yeah. I've won a world title in strongman. I've won the Ultimate Strongman World Championships. So I've won a world championships, but it's not really like the pinnacle of the sport, if you know what I mean. You know, I'd probably say my Europe Strongest Man win is better than my world title win. Even though there was good guys there, I beat guys like Zadrunas, Janasha, you know, Misha Shivlikov. There was great guys there, but it's not kind of, you know, it's like boxing and having like one of the lesser important belts. I think the way for me, kind of picking the absolute best guys. I mean, you look at it like in terms of tennis, I guess, with like the Grand Slams. You look at the best guys are the guys that can win everything. So someone like Zadrunas, who's won everything, to me is the greatest strongman of all time. You know, he's won the Arnolds 8 times. He's won World's Strongest Man 4 times. He won the IFSA World's Strongest Man twice. So technically, he's a 6-time World's Strongest Man. He's won literally every show there is to win. That, to me, describes the greatest of all time. And, you know, the records that he's held as well, the amount of records he's broken, his longevity in the sport. I will always say right now, he's the best of all time. Whether he's the best right now, you know, he's clearly not the best right now. But for me, he's the best strongman of all time, and I give him that title because he's won everything. All the big major titles he's won. So if you've just won one major title, how can you kind of class yourself as the best, especially if there's only 5 events in that final? You know, you were the best on the day, and, you know, I won Europe's Strongest Man. I'm claiming it was a win, but I won't go around saying I'm the best in the world because of one win. I think you need that consistency. Guys like Brian Shaw, guys like Zadrunas, guys like Thor, they've done it time. Bill Kazmaier back in the day, you know, even like maybe in the 90s and early 2000s, guys like Sven Carlson, they won lots of competitions at different events. You know, that's how you kind of see who is the best. I don't think one event is enough. And while we don't have any event that, you know, I love all the shows, genuinely. I love Strongman. You know, I like watching the Arnolds. I like watching World's Strongest Man. I like watching the Giants live shows. There's no one show that I would say is the most important. World's Strongest Man in terms of titles, because it is the title everyone wants. But I think it depends what you're after. I mean, some people don't even remember the guys that win the Arnolds. Like Lalas won the Arnolds. Lalas is one of the best strongmen of the modern era, but not so many people know about him because he never won Worlds. I think winning Worlds. You look at someone like Eddie Hall, who broke the 500 kilo deadlift record, and he won World's Strongest Man. He didn't actually win that many strongman titles, but that one World's Strongest Man title has kind of set him up. And, you know, in terms of the public knowing who you are, World's Strongest Man is the most important.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that, because I was thinking about this not too long ago, and, you know, there's always going to be people that are going to take this out of context, but as incredible as Eddie Hall has been with his career and with the titles that he's won, from an actual competitive strongman perspective, if you don't know about it, then you're not quite really aware of it because it's just whatever you see on social media. But from a strongman perspective, that there are many other strongmen that have won multiple forms of the titles that Eddie has back to back, years after years. And actually, you know, there are people that, still that are competing today that have won those titles over and over again and are still in contention to keep on winning them now. Which, to me, like, that's what I love about strongmen. Like, they're guys that they just want to be strong. They don't just want that title and then want to go and do whatever. Like, they're there because they just love this and they want to come back every year and they want a chance to be the world's strongest man again. And I love that.
And the thing, I don't think there's anything wrong with both. Thanks, baby. I don't think there's anything wrong with the way Eddie did it. Eddie was a very determined man, put everything into winning World's Strongest Man, and he achieved his goal. Whereas for someone like myself, I just genuinely love strongman. So I'm not fussed about kind of going into movies and doing other stuff. I just love strongman. I like competing it. I like challenging myself. Take someone like Zadrunas. He just likes challenging himself, and obviously he's won so many things, and to still want to do it at Zadrunas level with Zadrunas' background kind of baffles me sometimes, because I think you've done everything. What is there left to kind of achieve? But he still just enjoys it. Whereas Eddie and some of the other guys, they want to kind of move on to something else. And I don't think there's anything wrong with either way. It depends on the person that you are. But it's just kind of, that they're all great athletes. It's just everyone's different, I guess. And for me, it's a passion that I have. I love what we do. I love kind of being around it and trying to make it grow and get better.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's a case of that you have to try and figure out in your head as well, how long do you want your career to be? Do you want the longevity of being, a Mark Felix where you've been competing for the best part of like 20, 30 years? Do you want to come in? Do you want to claim that title? And then do you want to leave and then move on to something else? And then obviously those two paths are very, very different, and you have to try and figure out which one is going to work for you, because you can't rush these things. But
no, the guys that tend to rush things tend to have shorter careers. That's something I've noticed. But again, it's got to be personal choice to what kind of level you're going to push your body to, and that's everyone's different there. But for guys like Mark, for myself, for guys like Terry Hollins, we've had long careers and we're still competing and still enjoying it.
And what's the reason that you think that you guys, because you guys have competed against, it must be in the thousands now of strongmen that have come and gone that you have seen, whether it's grassroots and even at a competitive level. People come and go every single season. There are people that have competed almost on a world standard stage, and you kind of go, who? What was that name? They did that one competition once in 2003, and then no one ever knows about them again. What is different about you guys compared to all of these other people that have fallen by the wayside? What are you doing differently, man?
Not giving up when things kind of go wrong, I think, is probably the biggest. I've seen a lot of people get one injury and that's it. They're done. They're like, oh, I can't. They're probably expecting more from the sport than the guys like myself, Terry and Felix, who started back when there was nothing in the sport anyway. We started for the enjoyment of it and the fun. There was no money at all when we started Strongman. There was no kind of fame from Instagram or anything like that, because there was no Instagram or Facebook when we started. When Mark started, there was no internet.
yeah. No one's recording any sets on a mobile phone, that's for sure.
Know how to use social media now. But I think we're just three guys that like training in the gym, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think sometimes now people kind of start the gym and they have to label themselves as something rather than just enjoying training in the gym. For me, I joined the gym and it was just fun. And then I tried a strongman comp and I got better at strongman. But you'll get guys now, they're a strongman. They've never competed, but they're a strongman, or they're a powerlifter.
Yeah, they haven't entered a novice competition yet, but they have like powerlifter, or they have strongman in their Instagram bio, and you go, what? You've only ever picked up a 47-kilo log? Like, that doesn't count. You're not allowed to say that.
I've got nothing against people wanting to do so. I play darts on a Thursday night for a local club. I don't go around saying I'm a darts player on social media. And I wouldn't expect a Sunday league football player to kind of say the same, when they're playing one football match on a Sunday. It's just go and enjoy it, do it. There's nothing wrong with that. But you don't have to live your life just through social media just because you kind of have a hobby.
Yeah, it's like people are almost taking the enjoyment out of it. They're doing it because they want to be like part of a team.
They want to be professional. They want to be recognised for it. They want to kind of have that following and the kind of stuff that comes with celebrity kind of status, if you like. But I can promise nothing much changes. It's.
People stop you in the street, you have to sign a few more autographs, and you get waved at.
But you still got to get home and do your chores, and change the baby's nappies and stuff like that. It's kind of a weird experience when you go from competing in huge crowds and you're so focused on your competition, you've built up to it, you have these huge fans kind of following you, and then suddenly you're sort of back at home and just chilling out like any normal person. It's strange for a lot of people, but I've always been quite grounded anyway. I never really see myself as a celebrity. I'm just a freak that's good at what I do. I'm good at lifting stuff up and putting it back down. It's about as simple as it is. I'm not really impressed by celebrity anyway. If I'm honest with you, it's not what impresses.
I think it has a different meaning in this day and age, doesn't it? I think like when you were a younger man, the idea of celebrity, even like 10, 15, 20 years ago, a celebrity back then is very, very different to what you would class as like
celebrity
famous celebrity now.
Do something back then, like be a singer or be an actor or something like that. It's different now, but.
Now you can take a photo of your ass and put it on Instagram and you're a celebrity.
I don't know if I'd be a celebrity.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm sure there are a few sites that would take those photos. 100%.
We'll keep that for when everything else goes tits up.
It's interesting. So how you talk about the family thing, and I think that's a really interesting point to kind of hop off, because obviously the life that you've had and the amount of dedication that you've had to put into training, that you've had to put into nutrition, that you've had to devote to things that obviously takes you away from your family. How does that work? Like, how has the relationship been with like your other half? Like, has it been hard at points because you have that stress? Like, because obviously it's just another contributing factor.
How's our relationship been with me doing strongman?
Nightmare.
There's times when it's hard, particularly when I'm training and like deep into kind of like a training camp for big competitions, where it can. I think especially as I've got older, I've been much better at sort of not getting so stressed. I think when I was younger, it was more kind of strongman was everything. Whereas as I've got older and you have kids and stuff like that, priorities change. So, now there's more important things to me than strongman. Whereas in my 20s, especially like when I was starting out, it was all I cared about. It was everything. It was all I thought about. Whereas now I can switch off completely from strongman and then just go to a competition and enjoy it. And actually, it helps me a lot because I'm quite relaxed at competitions. Whereas sort of when you're younger, you're so nervous and uptight, and you kind of. I think the fact that I can relax more now, it definitely helps me, and it helps our relationship as well, doesn't it? I'm probably a lot more chilled than I used to be.
It's not really a nightmare.
No. Even like, I mean, the worst time for me is when I get injured, but even now when I get injured, I'm a lot better than I used to be.
Yeah.
I think because I've gone through that process so many times, I just know that it's not the end of the world. Okay, you tore your bicep. Shit happens.
Yeah,
you have two options: give up or start looking at ways to improve and recover and come back again. That's your two options. You don't have any other options. So there's no point in sitting there crying about it. And I have guys that, oh, my arm hurts today in the gym. Well, this is strongman. It's going to hurt. Be the same if you're a professional in any sport. Things are going to hurt. You're pushing your body to those limits. It's tough. I mean, I've got people, they say, oh, I can't do a switch grip deadlift, a mixed grip deadlift because I've got the biggest fear of tearing my bicep. If your biggest fear is tearing your bicep, this sport's not for you. It's simple as that.
Yeah. I think that was kind of one thing that I was kind of blessed with coming across from a very high standard of rugby. I was playing with guys that, they're having their knees replaced at 16 years of age. I've torn my pec, I've torn the cruciate ligaments in my knee, I've done meniscus damage, I've done a lot of things, and I busted my body before I got over. So
social media as well, you can get criticised for pushing yourself in the gym. People are so kind of conscious of technique and stuff like that. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's good to be kind of conscious of those things. But when you are competing as an athlete at a high level, you cannot go in being safe. Okay, so in the gym, you should be sensible. You should be trying to sort of, progress. But when you compete, the best analogy I've got of it is imagine being in a Formula One race and saying to yourself, right, I'll drive 10 miles an hour slower just so I don't crash.
Yeah.
So
I'll get up to third gear and we'll see how we go from there.
Come last. So if you're competing as a strength athlete against the best guys in the world, and you go in and you're like, oh, I'll go 85% today, you're going to come last. You have to go to that 100%. And when you go to the 100%, of course there's a chance that something can go wrong. That's the same in any sport. You can have terrible injuries playing football. You can have terrible injuries in rugby, particularly. I mean, you know that yourself. I played rugby to a high level as well. It's a tough sport. You know, tennis, you get repetitive strain injuries playing table tennis. There's always injuries in sport. It's just part of what you do. People that go running injure themselves. It's just something that it's something will happen if you're going to push to the highest level. I don't know any top level strongman that's never had an injury.
Yeah, but also you can equally also put your back out getting something out of the kitchen cupboard.
Of course you can. And I'm not saying go out there and be an idiot and do stupid things and lift with terrible technique, because of course you're going to hurt yourself then. But you can take all the precautions in the world and you can still get injured. So if you're worried about that, do something else. And you still got a chance of getting into doing that anyway.
Yeah, 100%.
It's just one of those things that kind of, I've been around the sport for a long time. You see a lot of new people kind of criticize certain things that people do, and then 3 months later they get injured themselves anyway. It's a tough sport. There's, things go wrong sometimes, but you've got to pick yourself up, mentally be strong, look at new ways to improve all the time. Focus on the recovery, focus on good technique, etc., and come back, because a lot of us have proved that you can come back from these disappointments.
Yeah, and we live in a day and age where we have access to the most amount of technology and information that we do now. There are constant new ways that we can help with our recovery that we're finding out about. We're able to run more scientific analysis on certain movements that give us better bang for our buck, and we're just becoming more aware of how our bodies should be and how they should feel and what we can do to do that. And there's such a vast wealth of knowledge. I can hop on Instagram now and find 20 different physio accounts that can give me all of the information that I need to be able to mobilize my hips properly and my shoulders. So I think it's almost getting to a stage now where there isn't really an excuse to not be doing these things. And I think we can see it, because you've got these guys that are going through much longer periods of time where they're not getting injured, they're constantly progressing because they're not having to take their foot off of the pedal to do rehab stuff, and they're making it to the world stage, and in a couple of years of competing at a top level. And I think more of us need to become more aware of, actually, maybe a bit of yoga here and there and a bit of Pilates and a bit of body balance is actually quite good for you. I tried Pilates
once. Just the old women were laughing at me, so I didn't go back.
Dude, anyone that says that yoga is easy has quite obviously never been to a yoga class. I go every week, and it is the hardest 45 minutes of my life. I would rather do a PR deadlift every week than try and go into that class. I hate it, but every single time that I step out of the class, I feel 1,000 times better, and my body is better, and I know that I'm going to be better when I go into my lifts for the rest of the week. I think people just need to start paying attention to that sort of stuff more. It's simple stuff, but if you do the simple stuff well, I mean, you're perfect.
I'm a big fan of simple stuff. I think people overcomplicate way too many things. I think if you get your nutrition right, you get your rest and recovery right, and your training, you're going to make big progress. Yeah. Too many people look at all the kind of 1% things rather than getting the basics right.
Yeah. I was talking to Nate Harvey about this on another podcast, saying that it tends to be a case of now that everyone's so worried about their side dishes and their accessory work that they've forgotten about the main course. The bread and butter of what you're actually meant to be doing is that we're still so focused on this mobilization and this stability and this, and it's like, well, actually, can you squat? Yes or no? No? Well, then you need to get better at squatting. Yes? Well, you still need to get better at squatting and then do that stuff as well.
Yeah. Exactly that. People kind of talk about like supplements or kind of, weird exercises and stuff like that. It's just get the basics right. You get the basics right, you're going to progress. Then you can look at those little things. Like I will look at little things at my level, because 1% makes a difference at the top level. But 1% when you're at the bottom level doesn't make a difference at all.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a case of that if you haven't got to the top of your game, of where you are, then there's no need for you to then be trying to find these 1 or 2% increments, because it doesn't make a blind bit of difference.
It takes away from what you should be focusing on anyway. So, if you're working full time, you've only got an hour and a half or 2 hours to be in the gym. Why spend an hour warming up and doing all these kind of stupid little kind of warm-up exercises when you could warm up in 5-10 minutes and you get on with the stuff that you should be focused on? it's the same with food. People are like, oh, what kind of supplements shall I take? Eat food; it's better for you. You're gonna, grow more.
Yeah. It's like, what's the point of spending like an extra £100 on supplements when you're not even hitting your basic protein count at all? You're eating processed crap food that isn't going to do anything for you. Don't worry about spending that 50 quid. Correct what you're doing here, and your performance is going to get better without that stuff anyway.
And even like the recovery side of things. I mean, I'm a big fan of chiropractic treatment and physio and stuff like that. But get your sleep right. Sleep is when you're recovering. So get that right first, and then you can start looking at other things. I would say chiropractic treatment is better than physio for strongman, particularly chiros that kind of do muscle function tests and get the kind of central nervous system kind of firing right, and the signal that goes to all the different joints. It's something I've kind of taken a lot more time in as I've got later on in my career, but it's something that definitely helps. But if you can get your sleep right, if you can get your nutrition and hydration right, hydration is very important. That's something that kind of gets overlooked quite a bit. But food, hydration, sleep, and training, you get those things right, you're going to progress and be very good.
Yeah, 100%. And just to kind of wrap things up, Laurence, I asked the same question to everyone, so it's going to be interesting to see what you say to this. So I want you to imagine that we're taking a trip back in time, and you're going to visit your younger self. So you're kind of 10, 11, 12 years of age, and you get to spend a couple of moments with your younger self, and you get to look into your eyes, and you get to deliver and impart one bit of wisdom, knowledge, information that is going to help your younger self to get through all of the hardships and crap that you've had to go through in your life to get to where you are today in your life. What advice, help, information do you give to yourself?
That would be a good thing to be able to do. I would say, like, I would make sure to myself, I kind of listen to everyone and take little things from lots of people. There's so much information out there kind of now that you can really confuse yourself. But you've got to be kind of smart enough to kind of go with your gut instincts and feel what works for you. And I've in the past kind of like experimented with different things, and I often end up going back to what I kind of believe in myself rather than kind of going for the different fads that are available and popular at the time. So I think I'll go back and listen to everyone, take advice in, but kind of pick little things from each person, figure out what's the best thing for you, and at the end of the day, just go with your heart, because there's so many other influences, friends, family, etc., etc. There's plenty of people that told me I shouldn't do strongman. It's a waste of time. You kind of waste. I've been told all that kind of stuff before, and 10 years later, I became, Europe's strongest man. I competed at World's Strongest Man 11 times, broken world records, won countless international and national titles. So I've done okay in a sport that I love, and I was told not to do. I'm sure Eddie Hall was told he'll never be world's strongest man. He'll never deadlift 500 kilos. You've got to go with your gut instinct. Believe you're capable of things, but be humble with it. Focus on small goals. Don't kind of, have the big goals, but focus on the small goals to get there. I think in terms of lifting, a lot of people have these big, huge goals, and they're so focused on the big goal, they don't break it down into smaller chunks. I think the last bit of advice I'd kind of give myself would just be to not rush things. Take your time. I probably would have been further ahead in my career if I didn't rush things, and I could have avoided a few injuries. I tried to come back from injuries a little bit too quickly when I was younger, and ended up getting injured again. And it's something I kind of advise a lot of the younger guys now. I would have made myself compete a lot less, but things we can live and learn from, and hopefully I can pass on some useful.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I ask it. It's so fascinating to hear everyone's different stories, because people approach it from all different kind of angles, but it's very interesting because there tends to be very similar underlying veins of truth throughout all of them, which I always find that's very, very fascinating. And a lot of it is, going with your gut instinct and feeling things for yourself and doing what's right for you, and not listening to everyone else. So I love that. Man, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really, really appreciate it. I mean, I could literally speak to you all night, but I understand that your other half probably wants to spend some time with you today. So I will give in to her, and I will hand you back over. So thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem, buddy. Take it easy.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.